When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. It wasn't because I was strong or because I had nothing to lose. No, it was because I had already lost so much, quietly, and my heart had learned to fold itself into small, careful pieces. That morning, I had woken up to sunlight spilling across the kitchen tiles, the smell of coffee still warm in the air. My husband, as always, was sitting across from me, reading the newspaper, a faint crease between his brows. And then he said it, the words I never thought I would hear. "I've invited some people over today," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes darted away. "Family. From long ago." I paused, spoon halfway to my mouth, staring at him. My birthday. I had spent decades quietly marking this day with candles on a small cake, wishing silently for peace. And now, he had chosen this day to reveal a secret I had no idea existed. 30 years he had hidden it. 30 years of smiles, of quiet evenings, of the life we built together. And now, on a day that should have been simple, ordinary, a little celebration, I would meet them. The people he kept in shadows, tucked away behind old photographs I had never seen. I felt a strange mix of hurt and curiosity, like a tide that both pushes and pulls. I wanted to ask questions, to cry, to run. Yet there was a calm that settled in my chest. Perhaps it was the wisdom of years, or perhaps it was the resignation that life doesn't always unfold the way we expect. And so I smiled. I placed my empty cup on the table and nodded, a gentle, quiet gesture. "Yes," I said softly, "we will meet them." Setup, 1 to 300 words. My name is Amina. I'm a woman who has lived quietly, mostly in the spaces between what others notice. My husband, Rayhan, and I met when we were young, full of dreams we thought would last forever. We married soon after college, and our life together was simple, ordinary, comfortable. We had a small home on the edge of the city, a garden with a lone jasmine bush, and a kitchen that smelled of cardamom and fresh bread on weekends. Rayhan was gentle, not loud, not the type to speak in grand declarations, but he loved deeply, and in ways that were quiet but unwavering. We had one child, our son, Imran. From the moment he arrived, my world shifted. Suddenly, every little decision, every choice, revolved around him. I spent years teaching him to read, to tie his shoes, to believe that the world was a place of kindness. Of course, I knew the world could be cruel, but I wanted him to have a shield, even if it was fragile. Rayhan and I had our struggles, like every marriage. There were long silences over small misunderstandings, nights where we went to bed angry, and mornings where we didn't speak a word until the sun had fully risen. But we survived. We endured, and we learned the quiet rhythm of forgiveness, of letting some things go because love, sometimes, is in the giving up, in the yielding. I never suspected that there was another chapter of his life, another family, a set of roots I had never been aware of. And yet, in that moment, with him quietly waiting for me to respond, I realized that even after 30 years, a person can still hold mysteries. The days leading up to that morning were unremarkable. Rayhan left for work, I tended the garden, and I thought about the years that had passed. Birthdays had become less about presents and more about reflection. I thought about my parents, who had long gone, and the friends who had drifted away. I wondered sometimes if I had spent too much time in routine, in quiet patience, never asking for the things I truly desired. When he returned home that afternoon, there was a tension in the air, almost like the calm before a storm. He was carrying a box, small but heavy, wrapped in simple brown paper, and behind him, there they were, 3 people I had never seen before, looking nervous, uncertain, like children stepping into a world they weren't sure belonged to them. There was a woman, perhaps in her 40s, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. A young man, maybe in his 20s, who clutched a backpack like it was a shield. And a little girl, no older than 7, hiding behind the woman's legs, peeking out with wide, curious eyes. Rayhan looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the weight of a secret in his expression. "They're family," he said simply, "from before we met." I nodded again, slowly, and gestured toward the living room. "Come in. Sit. Make yourself at home." Inside, everything was quiet. The air smelled faintly of rain and earth from the garden. The little girl shuffled her feet, the young man fidgeted with his hands, and the woman looked at me, almost searchingly, as if trying to read my thoughts before speaking. I wanted to ask questions, but I also wanted to wait, to let them feel safe, to let the truth settle gently. I knew the story wouldn't be simple. Nothing like this ever is. We sat. Rayhan placed the box on the table. I didn't ask about it immediately. Instead, I looked at them, trying to understand who they were, how they fit into the man I had known, loved, and built a life with. The woman finally spoke. We didn't know how to, or when, to come to you," she said, her voice soft, trembling. "But we thought your birthday might be the right time." Her words hung in the air. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and tenderness. I had imagined many scenarios in my head over the years. Arguments, heartbreak, tears. But not this. Not a quiet, fragile meeting on a rainy afternoon, where time seemed to bend in ways I could not anticipate. Rayhan cleared his throat. "I should have told you years ago, but I was afraid. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to protect what we have." I looked at him. 30 years. 30 years of silence and hidden truths. And yet, here we were, sitting together, all of us, in one room with a box on the table between us, waiting to be opened. I took a deep breath. "Then let's open it," I said. "Together." We opened the box together. Inside were photographs, letters, and a few small trinkets wrapped carefully in tissue. The smell of old paper filled the room, faintly musty, but comforting in a strange way. I picked up the first photograph. It was Rayhan, much younger, sitting with the woman and a little boy I didn't know. Their smiles were bright, full of life, but something in me trembled as I realized they were a part of him I had never known. The woman watched me closely. These are your husband's children," she said softly. "From before." I nodded. I understand." My voice felt small in the space. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I felt a hollow ache, like a room in my heart had been unlocked after all these years, and I was seeing something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The little girl peered at me shyly. I smiled at her, and she inched closer, still holding her mother's hand. "Hello," I said gently. "I'm Amina. Happy to meet you." She nodded, barely whispering, "Hi." We sat for a long while, quiet. Rayhan went to the kitchen to make tea, leaving the room feeling even heavier with silence. The young man, the boy from the photograph, finally spoke. I don't know why he didn't tell us sooner," he said, eyes on his shoes. "We waited for him, for years, and then suddenly..." His voice trailed off. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to tell him that I understood waiting, that life has its ways of keeping people apart, even when hearts ache. But I stayed silent. Words felt fragile, incapable of holding the weight of this moment. The woman cleared her throat. He was afraid, she said softly, of losing what he had here. She gestured at me, of losing you. And maybe we were afraid too, afraid of disrupting your life, your family. I nodded again. There were no accusations in their words, only truths, delicate and trembling, like glass waiting not to shatter. And yet, even in this quiet, I felt it, the rising tension between what was known and what had been hidden. 30 years of secrets cannot simply dissolve in one afternoon. They seep into every memory, every quiet corner, shaping decisions, creating small gaps where misunderstandings can fester. Do you want to know everything? Rayhan asked when he returned with the tea. His hands trembled slightly as he set the cups down. I can tell you, if you want. I took a slow sip of my tea. The warmth of it traveled down my throat, steadying me. I wanted to know. I needed to know. But at the same time, I feared the truth would break something delicate in me. Yes, I said. Tell me. And so he began. The words came slowly, haltingly, like a river struggling to flow over a rocky bed. He spoke of a love from his past, a woman he had met when he was barely out of university. He spoke of choices, mistakes, and responsibilities he could not escape. He told me about the children, about the boy, now a young man, and the little girl, born long after he thought he had no more chance to be a father. As he spoke, I felt my chest tighten, a mixture of hurt and empathy. I had known pain in my life, yes. But this was a pain that didn't belong solely to me. It belonged to him, to the woman, to the children, to all of us who had been living in separate parts of a story that should have been shared. The young man finally spoke up again. I forgive him, he said quietly. I don't hate him, but I needed to know. I needed to see him, to understand why he stayed away. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I swallowed them down, feeling the fragile pulse of connection growing between us. He needed acknowledgement, and here, in this living room, he was receiving it. The little girl tugged gently at my sleeve. Will you be my grandma? She asked, her voice trembling. I froze for a moment. My mind raced with conflicting emotions. She had called me grandma, even though I had never held her in my arms before. Never watched her grow, never guided her through scraped knees or bedtime stories. And yet, how could I say no? I bent down slowly, smiling softly. Yes, I said. I'll be your grandma. Her face lit up in a way that made my chest ache. That simple word, yes, was heavier than any secret, more binding than any truth. For a while, things settled into an uneasy calm. We spoke about small things, the school she attended, the work her mother did, the city they lived in before coming here. But even in the light conversation, I felt the tension lurking underneath. 30 years of hidden life cannot vanish so easily. Old habits, old fears, they linger. Rayhan and I walked through the memories of our own years together. I realized, painfully, that I had loved him without truly knowing him, just as he had loved me without revealing all of himself. Love, I realized, is not just about knowing everything. It is about accepting the unknown, trusting in the fragments that are shared. And yet, conflicts arose, small at first, like ripples in a pond. The young man, polite but firm, asked about decisions Rayhan had made, choices that affected their lives without their knowledge. The woman asked gentle questions, but her eyes were sharp, searching, trying to understand the reasoning behind decades of silence. I listened quietly, offering small reassurances. "We're all here now," I said softly. "That's what matters." But even as I spoke, I could feel the subtle shift. Rehan, usually calm, looked uneasy. The young man's gaze flicked at him, measuring, weighing. The woman's hands twisted in her lap, and the little girl, sensing the tension, drew closer to her mother. There were moments of silence where no one spoke, and yet everything was being said. Anger, fear, longing, and love intertwined in ways I could feel in the air. I realized then that forgiveness is never simple. It is not a switch that can be turned on. It is a journey, step by step, moment by moment, through small gestures, through patience, through understanding the depth of another's choices. I remembered the birthdays I had spent quietly, the long nights sitting alone after Rehan had fallen asleep, the moments where I had questioned whether I had truly known him. Now, in this room, with his hidden family before me, those moments took on new meaning. They were not regrets. They were preparation, unknowingly, for this day. Hours passed. Tea was poured and refilled. Stories were exchanged. Laughter came slowly, hesitant at first. The little girl showed me a drawing she had made of all of us together. The young man spoke of his studies and his hopes, and the woman, finally, let herself relax, her shoulders dropping slightly, as if the weight of years had finally been acknowledged. And yet, even in these moments of fragile connection, the undercurrent of tension remained. Rehan and I exchanged quiet glances, a silent conversation passing between us. I could see his guilt, his fear, his longing to make things right. I could also see the pain he had caused, unintentionally, through his silence. I realized then that the rising conflict was not just between him and his hidden family. It was between the life we had built together and the life he had hidden. Between trust and secrecy, between love and fear, between what was known and what had been concealed. And so we navigated it carefully. Gentle words, small gestures, acts of kindness. The little girl offered me a flower she had picked from the garden. The young man shared a story about their childhood, laughing softly at the memory. Rehan apologized, humbly, repeatedly, and I nodded, listening, acknowledging his words without interruption. By the end of the evening, the tension had not disappeared, but it had softened. It was still there, like the shadow of a storm behind the clouds, but it no longer dominated the room. We had taken the first steps, slowly, toward understanding. And yet, I knew that the real test was still to come. The moments when truths would be fully revealed, when choices would be questioned, when hearts would be confronted with the depth of hidden lives. Because love, I realized, is never simple. It is never neat. It is messy, fragile, resilient, and demanding all at once. And sometimes, the people we love the most carry worlds within them we cannot see, worlds that shape their choices, their fears, their hearts. It happened a few days later. We had spent the last afternoon slowly adjusting to each other's presence, sharing small smiles, tentative laughter, and quiet conversations. I thought we had reached a fragile peace, but life, as it often does not allow peace to last without challenging it. The young man, Armin, stayed behind after our afternoon tea. He was fidgeting with a photograph, eyes downcast, as if he wanted to ask a question he feared would break everything. Rehan and I sat quietly, sensing the weight of what was about to unfold. I need to know, Armand said finally, his voice trembling slightly. Why did you hide us? Why didn't you tell Mom? Or me? Or even her? He gestured toward me, eyes wide and searching. Why? I held my breath, letting the question hang in the air. It was not meant to hurt me. It was meant to understand, to pierce the veil of decades-long silence. Rayhan opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure how to start. I thought I was protecting everyone, he said finally, voice low. I thought if you knew, Amina, you would leave. I thought you would... I don't know. I thought I would lose you if you knew the truth. And for all these years, I carried it alone. I wanted to say something. Anything. But my heart felt too full, too raw. Instead, I reached out and placed a hand over his. Rayhan, I whispered. I stayed. I loved you. I never would have left you. Not for this, not for anything. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw decades of regret mirrored in his eyes. But Arman wasn't satisfied. He needed answers, details, reasons. And so Rayhan began to tell the full story. He spoke of the early years after they had been separated, how he had tried to support them from a distance, how he had wanted to be there for his children, but feared disrupting the life he had built with me. He spoke of nights spent awake, thinking of the family he had left behind, imagining the faces of children who grew up without him, and of the woman who had once loved him deeply. I listened quietly, absorbing every word. My chest ached for the children who had waited so long. I ached for Rayhan, carrying a lifetime of guilt in silence. And I ached for myself, for the years I had unknowingly shared him with another life. Then came the revelation I had not expected. In a letter, carefully preserved in the box, Rayhan had left instructions for me. He had hidden money, small savings, and personal belongings meant for them, his children, should they ever come to meet me. He had planned for this day, secretly hoping it would come, but terrified it might not. Arman's hands shook as he read the letter aloud. He thought about us, he said softly, tears welling in his eyes. Even though we didn't know, he planned for us. The little girl, Saira, stepped forward, holding a small hand-drawn picture of all of us. He's my daddy, she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't know. I didn't know he loved us like this. I wanted to cradle her in my arms, to tell her that love doesn't disappear just because it is hidden. I wanted to tell Arman that forgiveness was not just possible. It was necessary for all of us to heal. And yet, I also realized that no words could instantly erase decades of separation. Healing would take time, patience, and small, gentle gestures. Then, as if the universe wanted to test our fragile bond further, the woman, Sana, spoke. I need to know something too, she said quietly. Did you ever love me after all these years? Or was I just a chapter you forgot? Rayhan froze. I could see the conflict in his face, the raw honesty struggling to emerge. I loved you, he admitted, voice low but unwavering. I never stopped loving you, but life moved forward, and I made choices I thought would protect everyone, but in doing so I hurt you. I hurt all of you. Sana's eyes welled with tears. All these years. I waited, hoping, praying that you would return. I felt my own tears slip silently down my cheeks. For the first time in decades, I understood the depth of human mistakes, of love, loss, and the consequences of silence. We had all carried this pain, each of us in different ways. And now, in this quiet room, it demanded to be acknowledged. There was a long pause. The little girl's small hand found mine. The woman's gaze softened, no longer sharp, but cautious and tentative. Arman looked at his father, and I saw the weight of understanding begin to replace the weight of anger. Then Rayhan did something I had not expected. He pulled out another small box from his coat pocket. I want you to have this," he said, handing it to me. "It's yours to give. To them. To all of you." I opened it slowly, discovering letters, photographs, and a small key. The key to a house he had purchased years ago, long before I even knew him. A home meant for them. A place where they could belong. A place they could call their own. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream with relief, to cry, to hug them all, to let the years of silence dissolve in a moment. But I stayed quiet, feeling the magnitude of the gesture, the careful thought, the love buried in secrecy. I looked at Rayhan. This is incredible," I whispered. You thought of all of us?" He nodded, tears streaking his face. I never stopped thinking of all of you. I was afraid of losing what we had." I placed the box back on the table, gently, and turned to Arman and Saira. This is for you," I said softly. "All of it. And I hope you can forgive the years we lost." Arman took a deep breath, looking at his father, then at me. I think I can," he said quietly. "It's going to take time, but yes, I think I can." Saira hugged my waist tightly, whispering, "Grandma." And in that moment, I felt a warmth I had never felt before. The years of waiting, of hidden truths, of pain and separation, all of it seemed to converge into this small act of connection. Sana looked at Rayhan, eyes soft, voice trembling. I forgive you," she said. "It's not easy, but I can see you tried, even if in the wrong ways. We all make mistakes." Rayhan's shoulders slumped in relief, and I realized then that the turning point was not just about revelations, but about acceptance, about acknowledging the past, facing it fully, and choosing to move forward with love, even when it was messy, complicated, and painful. For hours, we sat there, talking, sharing memories, filling in gaps, asking questions, offering answers. Laughter returned, hesitant at first, then slowly, more genuine. Tears came and went. But for the first time, the air felt lighter. The burden of 30 years of secrets was no longer carried alone. It was shared, acknowledged, and slowly, quietly, forgiven. By the end of the evening, the little girl was asleep on the couch, her head resting on a blanket I had placed over her. Arman and Sana were smiling softly at each other, and Rayhan and I sat holding hands, feeling the fragile, beautiful, complex love that binds a family together, even a family born from hidden lives and years of separation. I realized then, fully, that the turning point was never dramatic. There were no raised voices, no sudden confrontations. The turning point was quiet. It was in the honesty, in the gestures, in the willingness to face the past and acknowledge it. It was in the small, trembling acts of forgiveness that paved the way for healing. And in that quiet room, on my birthday, I understood something profound. Love is not erased by secrets. It can be tested, fractured, even hidden. But when it is genuine, it survives. And sometimes, the most extraordinary acts of love are the quietest, the ones that wait for the right moment to be revealed 30 years later, on a rainy afternoon, with a box of memories between you. The days after that turning point were filled with quiet, gentle steps. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden, just small, careful gestures of reconciliation and bonding, like sunlight slowly warming a cold room. Arman stayed for a few more days. He wanted to understand the life he had missed, the choices his father had made, and the reasons behind years of absence. We walked through our home together, pointing out rooms, photographs, and memories. He asked questions, curious and cautious. "Did you ever think of us?" he asked one afternoon, his voice soft, almost afraid of the answer. I smiled at him gently. "Yes," I said, "all the time. Your father may have hidden it, but love is not something that disappears, even when it is kept secret. It stays, quietly, like the roots of a tree." He nodded, taking in my words. I could see the relief in his eyes, mixed with a lingering sadness. He was learning to reconcile the past with the present. A journey I had witnessed countless times in my own life, but never quite so vividly. Sarah, the little girl, adjusted to her new surroundings quickly. She ran through the garden, picking flowers, laughing at the way the wind played with her hair. One morning, she handed me a small bunch of jasmine she had picked herself. "For you, Grandma," she said proudly. I took them, my hands trembling slightly, and hugged her close. "Thank you, sweetheart. This means so much to me." Rayhan and I shared quiet conversations in the evenings, sitting together after the children were asleep. We spoke honestly, openly, about mistakes, regrets, fears, and hopes. For the first time in decades, I felt like the walls we had unknowingly built between us had started to crumble. "I never wanted to hurt you," Rayhan said one night, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was protecting us, all of us, but now I see that the silence caused more pain than anything else." I reached for his hand. "We all make mistakes," I said softly, "and sometimes the right thing takes time to reveal itself. What matters is that we face it together now." Sana and I began to talk more often as well. We shared stories about the children, our own experiences, and slowly, an unexpected friendship began to form. She was cautious, yes, but there was warmth in her words, and a willingness to move forward for the sake of her children. One afternoon, she and I sat in the kitchen, sipping tea. "I never thought I would meet you," she said quietly. "I never imagined that I could feel comfortable here, but I do. I think we can be a family, somehow." I nodded. "Yes," I said gently. "A family doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be willing to love and forgive." Rayhan joined us, carrying a small plate of cookies. The children giggled as he tried to balance the plate and tripped slightly, making them all laugh. Laughter, real, heartfelt laughter, filled the house in a way it had not for many years. It was a small miracle, fragile but beautiful, like sunlight breaking through clouds. We started small traditions. Every morning, Saira and I would water the garden together. Armin helped Rayhan fix things around the house. Sana and I cooked meals together, sharing stories and recipes. Evenings were spent around the table, sometimes with conversation, sometimes in quiet reflection, the air filled with a gentle understanding that we were all learning to coexist, to bond, to trust. There were moments of tension still. Of course, old habits die slowly. Arman would sometimes snap at minor frustrations, or Saira would throw small tantrums, testing boundaries she had never known. But instead of anger, we met these moments with patience, calm explanations, and gentle guidance. Every small act of understanding felt like stitching a tear in the fabric of our lives. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I watched Rayhan and Armin in the garden, fixing the birdhouse together. Their laughter carried across the yard, blending with the soft chirping of evening birds. I realized then how much had changed, how fragile yet resilient the bonds of family could be. I thought about the birthday when all of this began, how a single day, a single box, a single revelation had transformed our lives. I smiled quietly to myself, feeling the warmth of gratitude and acceptance. The little gestures, the small moments of connection became our lifeline. Rayhan would leave notes for the children, little reminders that he cared, that he loved them. I would join in, leaving small treats or kind words. We began to rebuild not just our family, but our understanding of love, trust, and forgiveness. One afternoon, Arman approached me with a photograph. "I want you to have this," he said softly. It was a picture of him as a child with his mother and sister. "It's from before, but I want you to be part of our story too." I took it, holding it close. "Thank you," I said gently. "I'll treasure it always." We celebrated birthdays together, small milestones, quiet victories. Syra learned to call me Grandma without hesitation, laughing freely in my arms. Armin began to open up about his dreams, his fears, his hopes, and Rayhan. He smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years, a smile unburdened by secrets, full of relief and love. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the past seemed heavy, but each time we faced it together, calmly, with honesty and empathy. Every tear shed, every gentle word spoken, every act of patience became a brick in the foundation of our renewed family. I realized then that the resolution wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about pretending 30 years of hidden truths hadn't happened. It was about accepting them, facing them, and choosing to move forward with love. And slowly, day by day, we began to heal. The house, once quiet and filled with unspoken words, became alive again with laughter, conversation, and the small rhythms of daily life. We learned to listen, to understand, to forgive. Sana and I shared quiet mornings in the kitchen, drinking tea and laughing over small mishaps. Armin and Rayhan worked together on projects, sharing stories and learning from each other. Syra and I tended the garden, planting flowers and vegetables, watching them grow just as we were growing together. I saw the subtle changes in Rayhan too. He was more open, more willing to share his thoughts and feelings. He had learned that secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, could not protect love. They could only delay it. And in that understanding, I saw the man I had loved all these years, whole again, unburdened by the weight of the past. The days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and slowly, quietly, our family found its rhythm. It was not perfect, but it was ours, honest, fragile, resilient, and full of love. I often reflected on the journey we had taken, how a single birthday, a box, and a revelation had transformed our lives, how the courage to face the past, to speak the truth, and to forgive had created something beautiful from years of silence. And I realized that resolution is not about fixing everything. It is about accepting, understanding, and moving forward with kindness and love. It is about holding each other's hands through the pain and choosing to stay, to care, and to love, even when life is complicated and messy. By the time Syra fell asleep on my lap, Armin and Sana were quietly talking with Rayhan in the garden. I felt a deep, calm peace. Not a perfect peace, not one without challenges, but a real, lasting peace, the kind that comes from honesty, acceptance, and love. And in that peace, I understood the true meaning of family, that it is not defined by years together, or by what is hidden or revealed. It is defined by presence, by patience, by empathy, and by the quiet, steady commitment to care for one another, no matter what the past has held. The house was quiet that evening. The children were asleep, tucked under blankets, their breathing slow and steady. Rayhan and I sat in the living room, hands intertwined, listening to the gentle hum of the night outside. I thought about the past, about the years of secrets, of hidden truths, of choices made out of fear and love in equal measure. 30 years had passed, and in all that time, life had been a quiet balance of joy and sorrow. And now, on the other side of it all, I could feel the weight of that past slowly lifting, replaced by something fragile and beautiful, understanding. I looked at Rayhan, the man I had loved through decades of quiet moments, of shared smiles, of small, tender gestures. He was not perfect, he never claimed to be, but he had shown courage, honesty, and a willingness to face the consequences of his actions. That, I realized, was the truest form of love. "Do you regret it?" I asked softly, my voice almost a whisper. He looked at me, eyes gentle, a faint smile on his lips. "Regret?" he repeated. I regret hiding it for so long. I regret the years lost. But I don't regret loving you, Amina. I don't regret the life we built together. And I don't regret today, because it brought them here, and it brought us closer in ways I couldn't have imagined. I nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "Neither do I said softly. "It hurt, yes. And yet, it also healed us. Slowly, gently, and I'm grateful for that." The memories of the turning point, of opening the box, of seeing Rayhan's hidden family for the first time, came flooding back. The little girl, shy but brave, calling me grandma. Arman, learning to understand his father, forgiving him. Sana, cautiously opening her heart, allowing connection to grow. All of it, the laughter, the tears, the fragile moments, had shaped the days since, bringing us closer in ways I hadn't dared hope for. I realized then that family is not just about blood or years spent together. Family is about presence, about patience, about small acts of love that speak louder than words. It is about forgiveness, about seeing someone's heart even when their choices have caused pain, and about allowing healing to grow where hurt once lived. Rayhan squeezed my hand gently. "Tomorrow," he said, voice soft, "we'll start something new, together, all of us, no more secrets." I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. "Yes," I whispered, "all of us, together." Outside, the wind rustled softly through the trees, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden. I thought about how life has a way of hiding miracles in ordinary moments, in boxes wrapped carefully, in birthdays that feel like any other. Sometimes it takes years, decades even, for those miracles to unfold. And sometimes it takes courage, the courage to face the past, to speak the truth, and to love fully despite the risks. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the calmness of the night settle over me. I thought about the lessons learned, the pain endured, and the love rediscovered. Life, I realized, is not perfect. It is messy, it is fragile, it is full of secrets and mistakes, but it is also full of beauty, of connection, of quiet moments that matter more than we often understand. When the children wake tomorrow and we gather together, it will be a new beginning, not perfect, but real, not without challenges, but filled with love. And that, I thought, is enough, more than enough. I opened my eyes and looked at Rayhan once more. He smiled, and I smiled back, a quiet, gentle smile that held decades of understanding, acceptance, and hope. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" he asked softly. "For staying, for forgiving, for bringing us together, even after all these years." He kissed my forehead gently. "And thank you," he said, "for believing in us, for trusting that love can survive even the longest secrets." And in that moment, I understood fully. Life is a collection of small, brave choices. Love is a promise to show up, even when it is hard. Forgiveness is the quiet bridge that connects broken hearts. And family is not just what we are given. It is what we choose to nurture, to protect, and to grow. I took a deep breath, feeling a calm warmth spread through me. The box, the letters, the hidden family, they were no longer symbols of pain or betrayal. They were symbols of resilience, of hope, and of love that had waited patiently, quietly, for the right moment to be revealed. And as the night settled over our home, soft and still, I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the past that taught us, for the present that embraced us, and for the future we would build together, finally, as a family.